Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of folk music, specifically folk music without metal elements or inspirations or anything metal. We have had plenty of folk metal on the channel, and not a lot of folk by itself, bass folk, I suppose we could call it. So we're going to dive in today with the next one on our list, which is Sunspot. I've never heard of this band, which is a recurring theme this week. I guess I just don't listen to a lot of folk music. The track is called Of the Wand and the Moon. Let's dive into this and see what's going on. I love the dynamic quality of the toms with that rising and falling of intensity. There's also a little bit of panning going on, but that just might be the drum placement in the mix. That heavy reverb, though, is very off-putting. The footage is not giving me any sort of reassurance either. Oh, I had that backwards. The band is Of the Wand and the Moon. The song is Sunspot. Gorgeous voice right here. I love the wide. That muted guitar. It's very percussive. A very warm, grounded, rooted performance here. Nothing really going over top at all. Just really digging into the emotional resonance of the track. Starting to open this up a little bit, we have the vocalizations in the background. Love those nice percussive rolls there. They're very clean, but they don't have a very harsh attack on them. Distinct but soft. Chord progression is just bouncing back and forth between two chords. It's very cyclical. It feels like there's no end or resolution in sight. Interesting. It almost sounded like it was at a slower tempo, this incoming banjo idea.
If the Lord took me right in this set, I wouldn't hear. Because I'm glad.
Okay. So this song has two sections and a slight variation on our second section to wrap the track up. I don't think that this is going to be an exceptionally long video, but we'll see where my mind takes me and where this analysis goes. So our opening was different. We had this hyper reverbed section that just basically feels eerie and ominous. There is something unnatural about it. I think a lot of that comes from the way that the sounds get wrapped back onto themselves, right? So the thing with reverb is that it plays the thing and then it plays it again, sort of like an echo. Actually, that's what it is. It's not reverb, it's a loop. That's what it is. We have that looping bit there. The thing, like, okay, so we typically associate a lot of natural things with smoothness. Think about creepy horror monsters. What do? They make really sharp, like, twitchy movements. That's unnatural. A lot of natural things that we see have flow to them. They are less rigid, and that's what we hear there at the beginning, where we get a little bit of that rising element in our tone that's being looped, a little bit of I think there's a rising pitch to it. There's also a little bit of a crescendo on it. It just gets a hair bit louder, and once it reaches a point, it just snaps back to where it was. It's a very quick, rigid movement. And then the repetition of it also feels unnatural because natural things are not perfectly symmetrical. They don't perfectly loop back in on themselves. They don't perfectly go back to where they were. It's very difficult to be perfect. And this is a perfect loop. And those two things combined make it very unsettling. Um, there are these beautiful tom movements throughout, though, and I absolutely love the tom ideas, the roles, the way that they're placed in the mix. Whether there is, I don't know if there's some panning going on or if it's just the way that the toms are placed, because toms tend to move from one direction to the other, going from higher to lower. Typically, they are placed on the left side as your highest, and your lowest tom goes to the right. And so when they get mixed, they also have this spatialness to them. Typically, in a lot of modern mixing, at least. Um, so, like I said, I don't know if there's a purposeful placement of specific tom hits that create a moving panning situation there, or if it's just how they're placed in the mix entirely. And it's just the panning ends up being a side effect of that. But there's something very beautiful about these rolls because we have dynamic qualities of increasing and decreasing intensity and volume. We get these really nice swells into lighter rolls, into bigger swells again. There's just this really nice ebb and flow to them, and then we also have the movement from left to right. It's a very dynamic drumming section that's a simple idea, just tom rolls, but it's just done very well. It's one of those nuanced things about acoustic instruments, nuanced performances of acoustic instruments that I absolutely love. But it's paired with that super eerie repeating tone. And we move from that into our second section, just kind of happens. There's just a point where we were doing the tom and eeriness, and now we have this nice acoustic guitar and lower range vocalist. And I had mentioned that this section is just very grounded, very rooted. Our vocalist isn't really pushing too hard. It's not a lot of emphasis or work being put into the pitch or the air pressure or anything like that. It's just a very steady, comfortable range for our vocalist that almost feels like we're sort of being spoken to. It reminds me a little bit of Johnny Cash. Just a very comfortable singing voice. Little downtrodden. There's some sorrow in the vocal timbre, in the voice itself, but there's not a lot of sorrow in the notes and melody that they're singing. It's present for sure. It's not a bright, poppy melody line, but it's also not as sad as the timbre of the vocals I'm hearing, which is not something a lot of people get to pick. If you're a trumpet player, you can pick the material of your trumpet. If you're a guitarist, you can pick the body and the strings and your pickups, your amp and your cab and all your pedals. Like you can change tones, but when it comes to vocalists, you're kind of stuck with the vocals you got. And I think that this person's vocals perfectly match the vibes, the emotion of the song. They're a perfect match for the music that they want to create. And it's not something I talk about too often. And it's not like this is the first band where the vocals just perfectly match the way I feel about the song. But it's the first time that I think it really connected to me. It really stood out. And like my brain's telling me this is something you got to talk about. Um, it adds, like I said, it adds a bit of a darkness, a dreariness, a weightiness to the music that isn't there at the forefront. The music kind of might allude to it. I wouldn't mind hearing a version of this without the vocals just to hear exactly what the rest of the instruments are bringing to the table emotionally to figure out if the way that I feel about the song is entirely because of our vocalist or if there are remnants of this pocketed away inside of the music. But regardless, the vocalist adds a bit of darkness, a bit of dreariness to the song, more so than we already have, and in a bit of a different spice than we already have. It is a beautiful choice for this. The rest of our instrumentation, though, is foundational aspects. It's all going to be chordal ideas and rhythmic ideas. To start, we have this really nice acoustic guitar, possibly, that's been widened and doubled. I don't know if it's necessarily double tracked as far as recorded twice. It could be, but we definitely have it on either side, pushed out a bit, and it feels like it's palm muted on the same chord throughout the whole song, so that we really just get that percussive attack of the strings. And there's a specific timbre, not really a specific attack style of acoustic strings. It's very different from electric strings, which tend to have, at least to my ears, a lighter attack. I don't know if it's a difference of uh, the components that make up the strings, the material that goes into it. Maybe acoustic strings are a little thicker. I don't know, but they have a chunkier attack to them. And we can hear that here because the strings are utilized entirely in its percussive manner. There is a small hint of the notes because they are being the strings themselves are being compressed at a specific length to which is going to change the vibration speed. It changes the pitch. Like, it is kind of present, but it's there and gone so quickly, and what's really left is just that resonant strumming sound. And it's pushed out to the sides. It is panned left and right exclusively. There is nothing in the middle anywhere. It is 100% on either side, and it's distant. It's a bit pushed out further than anything else in the song. Um, it's also really easy to lose track of. You can just kind of forget they're out there at times. But it's really interesting how they work against some of the lighter drumming in here, and within some of the lighter drumming to both accentuate and work around what our drum percussion is doing. And we get these two rhythmic components to the track that I think works really well, again, at grounding it. It's not an overly complex percussion or rhythmic component to the song, but there are two rhythmic ideas, and there are very few songs that there's very few songs that we check out on this channel with multiple percussionists. And it's weird to call a guitarist a percussionist, but in this situation, that's exactly what they're doing. And then our guitar is strumming some chords. There's also some atmospheric stuff that goes on in this section, and once we hit the second verse, I think, we bring in some vocalizations. It's a bit of a choir, possibly with oohs or ahs. I can't remember the sound or the vocal shape they were utilizing, but yeah, we get some of that in the background, just kind of fills up the space because it does feel kind of empty when this section first comes in. There's not a lot going on here. In the upper range, right? Our guitars are sort of in the lower area. Our acoustic guitars are just making percussive sounds. I didn't hear a bass or a cello or anything that would be in the lower end. Maybe that was just me missing it, unfortunately. And our vocalist, though, has is a deeper voice, really sitting down there as well. There's nothing really above it, and it doesn't feel like it's missing until it comes in, and you're like, oh, there was room up there. And like I said, it just feels very grounded, both in the instrumentation and also in the music writing. Everything's sort of a bit in a lower pitch, and you don't even necessarily notice that there's nothing above it because it just feels very rooted. There's nothing to even evoke the idea that there needs to be anything higher than what we have. It feels complete even though it is empty. And it's really interesting to recognize that. For one moment to say, yeah, this is beautiful, this is gorgeous. I don't know that I would add anything. Everything seems to be where it needs to be, doing what it needs to do. And then you hear a section and you're like, oh yeah, there's nothing in that area, in that range, in that style, in that musical type. And it's that click, like, man, How did I miss that there's nothing up there? And it's just a really interesting uh, circumstance that happens sometimes when you listen to music. And I love it. I really love having these moments of almost like profound questioning of my listening. How did they suck me into their world so much that I was blinded to this entire aspect, this entire range of music that wasn't being utilized? But they're just phenomenal storytellers in that right. Now, near the end of this second section, I don't know when it came in, but I don't believe it was there when we first entered it. It was there definitely in the final chorus. Might have been before then as well. There is a moving guitar idea. It continues in the same strumming pattern of our chordal guitar, but there is a melodic movement to it. And I started to pick it up, and I was like, "Oh, that's neat." It's just a 2-bar loop. Um, and it does the same thing on both bars rhythmically. It just shifts the notes to meet the chordal change. And so I started picking it up. I was like, I don't even remember what the melody was, so I'm not even going to try to sing it. But it's a little bit of movement, a little bit of hanging on to, it hangs on to a note, then does like 3/8 notes, and then hangs on to a note, does like 3/8 notes, and then it shifts the key, or shifts the chord so that we can meet what the rest of the band's doing. It does that same idea though, holds a note and then like 3/8 notes, something along those lines, and then it drops back down and does it again. What was very cool was as we transitioned out of this into the banjo outro, we actually passed this idea along. We shifted it from chordal ideas to individual notes, but we retained the feeling, the vibe, and the rhythmic component to it. It's a really nice way of passing an idea onto another to showcase it in a new light. And I think having the banjo fade us out was a really interesting choice. I don't remember hearing a banjo anywhere else in the track, and the banjo fades out into static. And we actually sit with static for like 15 seconds there at the end. Um, and between that and the static and the banjo, we have a unique outro to the track that doesn't really fit with anything else that went on. And I feel the same way about our midpoint and our intro. What does all this have to do with each other? Is going to be my big question going into the lyrics. Because right now, I'm not seeing anything connective between these other than passing the idea from the guitar to the banjo. Why did we take this huge instrumentation and narrow it down to an instrument that wasn't even there before, retain something we were playing, and then fade that out into static? We could have just faded what we had into static, and I don't think the intention or feeling of the track would have changed. We could even have taken what we had and faded it out to the single guitar. We didn't need to pass it to a banjo. What was the purpose of that? How does the intro relate to any of this? I I have a lot of questions because I'm getting all these vibes. All right, we got the eeriness, we got the very grounded, rooted uh, primary component of the track, and then we have an isolating outsider as our outro. And I just don't see how it all fits together. Last thing I want to talk about before we head into the lyrics is the chordal progression, which is just 2 chords. There's not much to say here. We have a tone that feels like it leads into our second higher tone, and that one doesn't feel like it leads back. We just loop back. We just go back to where we were. And other than just a cyclical element of this and the fact that it doesn't really feel like it fits, it feels more like a loop, a repetition, more so than a natural return back to this primary, the first chord that we have. I don't really get much out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that it has no purpose, but I do want to point out that a lot of folk music that I've listened to, as well as indie rock too. And I don't know why I want to group those two together, but a lot of the folk we've listened to this week reminds me of indie rock. Two bar chords or two chord progressions are not unusual. I wonder if we would go back into some of the tracks we checked out this week. Like Fleet Foxes was rather simple on the musical side. Um, other than that outro, and I wonder if maybe that was working with two bar phrases. Same thing with the Decemberists, is very melancholy throughout. Doesn't necessarily need a 4 bar phrase to achieve that, but I can't remember off the top of my head what the phrasing was on that. But yeah, so it's like I said, it's not anything that detracts. I don't look down on it for only having a 2 bar phrase, but I wonder if there's something specific about choosing it. It's not an unusual choice, but also we have one chord that leads into the next. It actually feels like it directs towards it, but I don't get that same direction coming back down to the first. It sort of just repeats, sort of like our intro, where we, we rise up in tone and then we just reset back. There's something about that that feels a bit unnatural, and I'm not going to say that the chord progression feels unnatural, but there is something about it that feels off. It's like I said, we're returning to something that we don't have direction for, which a lot of chord progressions that we listen to, the standard 4 bar chord progressions, and a lot of the very popular chord progressions that we have in rock music that came from blues and is derived from some of the simpler rock and roll and blues progressions, are based on leading tones and resolutions. This kind of doesn't have that. We have a leading tone, no resolution, and then just a reset without a lead back to it. So it feels odd to me because I'm used to hearing a specific kind of chordal structure. So let's dive into some lyrics. Let's see what's going on here. There's a sunspot in my eye, there's a guild of thieves that weighs me down, there's a darkness within our reach, and the roots that reach beneath. And in this darkness shall we crawl. Overwhelmed by the void, conjuring darkness black like coal, let the fire hatch out, let the pain unfold, our life passes like idle chatter, like ebbs out like children stutter. Hmm. So a sunspot in the eye would be uh like a blind point, right? You stare at the sun too long, or you stare at lights too long, which is a problem I have with these two lights right here. They're very bright. And occasionally you'll get those little like black dots in your vision. You can see everything else, but there's that little pocket that you can't see for a little bit. It takes a few seconds for it to go away. So there's a blind spot in their vision. A guild of thieves that weighs them down, and a darkness within our reach, roots that reach beneath into this darkness that we crawl. So they're blinded and restrained, and there's a darkness within that they feel forced to utilize. Overwhelmed by the void, conjuring darkness black like coal, let the fire hatch out, let the pain unfold. Our life passes like idle chatter, life ebbs out like children stutter. So yeah, they're saying that there's this darkness inside of everybody, and we should. I don't know if they're saying that we should utilize it for our gain, or if we need to let go of it. Because it says, let the fire hatch out, let the pain unfold. And if you release the pain, you talk about things that are upsetting you, or you try to get rid of your anger in constructive manners, your sadness in constructive manners, you can get rid of that darkness, right? Or you can release its hold on you or diminish its presence within you. But I mean, letting the fire out and letting the pain unfold can also be a phrase of utilizing the darkness as power. But he also says that our life is quick. It's a small moment on this earth. It passes like idle chatter does. Life ebbs out like children stutter. So quickly. There's a sunspot in my soul, a millstone round my neck, and a Judas kiss. There's a darkness coming in, a golden trough for your emptiness, and we stray through infinite nothing, haunted by our dead-weight dreams, conjuring darkness black like coal. Let the fever hatch out, let the moth unfold. Our love passes like idle chatter, life ebbs out like children stutter. Where there's a will, there's a way, but there's no will in the path led astray. Yeah, so our first bit is that life can keep us down, but we need to find a way to let go of the darkness, the anger, the hatred, the sorrow, because life is short. I'm not entirely sure about the second set here, but there's a similar element to a sunspot in my soul. So there's a part of the soul that he feels is incomplete. I don't know about the millstone around my neck, but he says there's also a Judas kiss, which could be, I mean, to take it very straightforward would be that somebody has offered them up, someone has backstabbed them or gone against their will. It says there's a darkness coming in, possibly from being betrayed, a golden trough for your emptiness, and we stray through infinite nothings haunted by our deadweight dreams. So coming back to this idea that there's a lot of stuff in life that can hold us down. We have a trough of emptiness. There's an infinite nothingness that we stray through, and we have these dreams that haunt us. Regardless, though, we need to let the fever hatch out. Now, interestingly, unlike the positivity I get out of the first part, we enter a bit of a negativity here. Instead of life passes like idle chatter, which sounds like a reminder, right? That life is short and you need to live it. This one says love passes like idle chatter, which feels a bit darker to me. It isn't a reminder of our mortality, it's a reminder that love is fickle, or can be. And he says, where there's a will, there's a way, but there's no will in the path led astray. So whatever they want to do or grow or become, they've lost the willpower for that. And even if they had the willpower to push through and persevere, the path that they were following, it doesn't take them where they want to go anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of darkness and sorrow across these lyrics that perfectly match the vocal style and timbre being presented. I think there's also a very these words feel like an older person trying to impart wisdom, right? It's definitely somebody who's a bit life weary. They have life experience, and life has knocked them down and kicked them while they're down as well. And that kind of feels like what this is. And it kind of fits with that grounded musical element too. This is not somebody who is full of themselves. They're not pompous or arrogant. This is someone who's extremely humble, who has been humbled by their life. So this middle section sounds perfectly coherent to me alongside these lyrical lines. I can kind of see the ending. This person feels alone. Love passes like idle chatter, so they feel like no one is there to love them anymore. Life ebbs out like children stutter. It could mean that so many of their friends have already passed on. But it could also mean that they know that their time on earth, their time alive is going to be ending soon as well. And soon could be, decades around the corner. This person could only be 50 or 60 and still have, you know, a lot of time left, but in the larger scheme of things, it's still a relatively short amount of time. And they might feel very alone because of that, especially since they have no more will to follow through on their dreams. and they feel that the path they're on isn't the one that's taking them where they want to go anyways. There's something very isolating about that I think returning down to a single, or not even returning, moving to a single banjo helps. But again, I don't know the choice of the banjo. That part's still not making sense for me. And the intro, I still have nothing on the intro. So, I have a few questions here. The core part of this track makes sense to me, but the intro and outro don't, and there's a few things in the lyrics that I could not pick up on, though I still think I got a decent read off of what's going on. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of Sunspot from Of the Wand and the Moon. Let me know if there's anything you enjoyed about it, didn't enjoy about it, anything you want to add on to my analysis or correct me on, let me know. Above the comment section is a description box. In there's a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch. You can support the channel through Patreon, submit special selections, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and so much more. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, we have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to be checking out our penultimate Folk Week track. And our final special selection for the week, Folk Week track. It's very difficult for that to flow, and I like my language to be very flowy. I don't have a lot of harsh elements in the language. I mean, even just coming from, the southern U.S., we drop a lot of our G's. We're over here running instead of running. Like, I'm just used to language flowing, so Folk Week track is just, it feels very awkward to me, so I had to chuckle about that. Anyways, I'm rambling. Let's finish this up. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.